North Asia remains on edge with no sign of an end to the tension after the attacks by the North just over a week ago. Welcome to Agenda. I'm Colin Chapman, and on the agenda next week is a significant tripartite meeting between Japan, South Korea and the United States, but the chances of any kind of solution to the crisis are not good. You can see the tactical details of the exchange of fire between North and South Korea on our website, along with satellite imagery that we've obtained and military analysis. Joining me to discuss this is Rodger Baker. Rodger, what's your analysis of where things stand now?
Well, we're at a very delicate position right now in Northeast Asia. Certainly, every side is making a case that none of them want war, none of them want this to escalate, and yet the South Koreans have an incentive to, if there's another North Korean action, to respond extremely strongly. The North Koreans may have a sense that they need to show one more time that they're tough. The Chinese are offering talks that they know nobody's going to come to. So we're at kind of an uncertain moment as we watch this situation unfold.
Yet some people are clutching at straws. For example, North Korea has hinted that it might start allowing international investment in mining in its country. A strange step if in fact you're planning a major war.
Well, one of the things we've been watching is to see whether or not the North Korean behavior with the shelling of this island fits within their typical pattern of creating crises in order to head into negotiations. And this seemed a step beyond what they've normally done in the past. Yet in the background, we're seeing certain actions that still fit in the old pattern. So we've seen regular inspection tours of Kim Jong-il and his son. We've also seen an announcement today by the North Koreans that they've upgraded to ministry status a natural resources department. And that's suggesting that they're going ahead with earlier plans to expand foreign investment in mining and try to draw in other individuals. And if you're about to head into a war, that's probably not something you would be doing.
The key to all this is, of course, China. But as you've said yourself on Stratfor, North Korea is a liability that China simply can't abandon.
Certainly when you look at China's relations with North Korea, it's been a bit contentious. The Chinese sometimes appear not to be able to control the North Koreans, or they get drawn into situations of tension with their other neighbors or with the United States over North Korea. At the same time, the Chinese are able to manipulate that. But in the end, when you look at the Chinese, North Korea serves as a strategic buffer. North Korea prevents effectively the United States from being able to place troops right along the Chinese border. And so no matter what you hear from the Chinese talking about, maybe supporting reunification or not supporting the North Koreans or sitting back, in the end, they're going to ensure that something is in that position, whether it be North Korea, whether it be a Chinese run North Korea, that creates that sense of space so that they can't have the United States come right up against the Yalu River.
Did WikiLeaks come up with anything that might be relevant here?
Well, some of the things that we've seen and what got a lot of play was the idea, for example, that the Chinese had considered letting the two Koreas reunify, letting South Korea run that. It's kind of a misrepresentation of the Chinese position. Certainly at times Chinese scholars or Chinese officials will say things like that, and they say that to appease the South Koreans. They say that to let the United States think that they're not offensive or they're not out trying to be dominant in the region. But in general, if you look at the Chinese position, the Chinese now, no less than in 1950, have an interest to prevent the United States from coming up to the Yalu River.
The date in the diary is this tripartite meeting between Japan, South Korea and the United States. But is there any real prospect that it could come up with any kind of solution?
The meeting between the United States and its two key Northeast Asian allies, Japan and South Korea, is probably not going to come up with some amazing new policy on North Korea or new way of resolving the situation. However, the United States really feels that it does need to demonstrate first and foremost its strong commitment to these allies, solidify that military commitment as well as the political commitment, and only then, after talking with the three of them, will the U.S. even begin to consider how it might go back into negotiations with North Korea and maybe allow China to facilitate those. So right now, this is about the U.S. showing to its allies and showing to the region that the United States does give a strong defense commitment to countries that it works with.
I talked to 3 former envoys to Seoul this week, and all of them agreed that South Korea had handled this in a pretty cool and sensible fashion. But they think that the solution is now going to be resumption of the 6-party talks. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think if you look at the 6-party talks, it's questionable whether the 6-party talks or any other multilateral forum is going to resolve the situation. And that's because, as you look at each of the players, they don't necessarily have the same end goal in mind. So for China, as we've noted, the Chinese are really not ultimately interested in a reunified Korea, at least not one that would in any way be a potential challenger or competitor or be an ally to the United States. The South Koreans don't necessarily want to rush reunification. The United States is not looking to get involved in either a conflict in the region or to abandon its position in the region. The Japanese are always cautious about the idea of a unified Korea as being really something that could challenge Japanese interests in the region. The Russians haven't decided whether or not they're getting back involved. The North Koreans certainly don't want to become subservient to the South Koreans. So when we look at the 6-party talks, the 6-party talks may be about stopping the North Koreans from having nuclear weapons, but the North Koreans already have them. There's very little that the North Koreans would get in giving up a capability that they already have. So I think if you look at the 6-party talks in particular, the Chinese use the talks as a way to manage the situation, but not as a way to resolve the situation. They use it to keep the other players in check. They use it to gain leverage over some of the other players. But in the end, I don't think we have anybody who's actually expecting these talks, these negotiations, to resolve either the North Korean nuclear issue or the broader picture, which is the division of the Korean Peninsula.
Rodger Baker there, ending this week's agenda. I'm Colin Chapman at Stratfor. Thanks very much for being with us today.